Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
I was actually wondering if you could talk about hatred.
Oh.
Yeah, I was kind of just curious about it and like where it comes from.
Well, hatred is an aspect of fire element, or you could say it's an expression of fire element. And fire element, when it's unbalanced, and especially in an extreme like that, think about the experience of hatred. First of all, it's one of extreme focus. There's really nothing like hatred and or being in love, two ends of a spectrum, neither of which is very balanced. Although being in love is more pleasant, but it's just as obsessional. So hatred is extremely focused. Hatred works the details. So this is the relationship to fire element. It has this incredible focus of attention and incredible focus on details. When you are compelled to hate something or someone, you have this clarity of vision, but it's like being locked up in a little cell with one movie playing the whole time over and over and over and over again. And hatred, of course, builds cases. That's how it functions. In order to sustain hate, you have to build cases, and those cases get more and more details added to them. So this is all this aspect of fire element, its relationship to vision. And of course, the enlightened essence nature of fire or anger is clarity. Right? So that clarity gets just compressed into this very narrow monomaniacal track. And then fire element is raging, and we call that raging feeling of fire element hatred. Then the other aspect of that, because hatred relates to hell realm, naraka loka. And the word naraka also refers to the individual. So it's an experience of extreme individualism, extreme separation. What are you doing when you're hating someone, or even when you're hating yourself, right? You're basically like marking this incredible distance or incredible feeling of separation between yourself and another, or yourself and a group of people, or even within yourself. You know, when you hate yourself, you become a self divided against yourself. And so hatred, extreme anger that we call hatred, is masking extreme loneliness. So there's an extreme lack of intimacy that hatred is producing. It isn't possible to hate anyone if you feel friendliness toward yourself or tenderness toward yourself. It starts with that karmic vision being applied to oneself, or an experience of someone else hating you that you internalize. And that could be over lifetimes, not necessarily something that happened in this lifetime. That strand could have come from anywhere, right? But one of the ways out of this, obviously eating in a way and living in a way that brings fire element back into balance, but there are karmas that are stronger than, what we put on our dinner plate. And hatred, of course, is an extreme. So it's very strong feeling. So one thing to do is to let yourself feel the lack of intimacy that is created by that. Let yourself feel the loneliness. And that's extremely painful, but hatred has a lot of energy. It feels alive. Of course, when we're hating on somebody, we feel connected to them. In fact, hating or anger at another person can sustain a relationship for decades. Not just if you're living with that person or friendly with that person, but if you leave a person in anger. Of course, you can be angry. Even enlightened people get angry. That's enlightened anger, right? Mm-hmm. But what I'm talking about is that compulsive pattern of hatred or anger, extreme anger. If you leave a relationship in that condition, you could be still thinking about that person 30 years later, having never seen them ever again. It's very powerful, and it masks the lack of intimacy by creating a connection through this energy of anger and hatred. It functions much the way all the realm visions function. in that it's attempting to solve the basic experience of separation and loneliness. But in the case of every realm vision, it's also creating more distance. So it's like you're taking one step back and one step forward, or eating food and then spitting it out. I mean, it just doesn't work, right? Ultimately. And so we have to be brave enough to actually feel the lack of intimacy and the loneliness underneath that. And then the corollary to that, it's not just about, okay, let me feel even worse. The other thing we have to do in kind of a parallel track is develop a friendly feeling toward ourselves. From that, we can start to heal. Some of that also has to do with just a friendly feeling about being alive, a friendly feeling about being here on earth. I mean, that's a little hard right now, but we can still do it. A friendly feeling about your place in nature, that you actually belong here, right? That you're not separate from the place that you manifested in is also an avenue that can begin to get you out of this. But the thing that's actually the biggest impediment when people have profound anger or hatred, whether for themselves or other people, I mean, usually they come together. The feeling of self-hatred is so uncomfortable that it just has to be like projectiled out onto other people just to get relief from it.
I mean, it's kind of impossible to imagine somebody who like was really friendly and compassionate towards themselves being super.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that. Yeah, that's right. I mean, in a sense, whatever you feel about yourself is what emanates toward other people, whether for better or worse. And I've talked about this so many times before, but the big obstacle with hatred or extreme anger is that your vision is so clear and you actually have convinced yourself that you are in a hostile circumstance and you have to defend yourself and you have to fight back and you have to hurt the enemy. So, calming down, cooling off, and being able to let in the idea that your karmic vision is not actually matching what's happening. And this is super, super tricky, because if someone's already experiencing self-hatred, the last thing they want to hear is that what they're experiencing or seeing is not what's actually happening. That they're already so destabilized that it's very, very hard to do that in a lot of cases. It just takes enormous sensitivity, and it's perfect timing almost to be able to do that. And then the people that experience hatred, which I would say there's no way to experience literal hatred without self-hatred, often don't have much ability to self-reflect with any kind of self-irony or sense of humor or anything like that, which is pretty much a requirement for self-realization. Because we have to denaturalize our patterns. We have to experience our patterns, but we also have to realize that they're kind of funny and they're not really who we are. And we have to realize the ridiculousness of our situation and the absurdity of our reactivity. All of those things are just great, great, great tools. But of course, people who experience self-hatred and a lot of anger are the most earnest folk. It's a hard one.
It kind of seems like hearing you talk about hatred, there's a fundamental lack of respect for the other person and
there's lack of empathy.
Yeah.
Lack of ability to put yourself in another person's shoes, or even desire to imagine what their experience is like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you notice that you're having some realm vision and it's not matching what's going on, and you have some feeling for what is going on, can you get yourself more over there, or is that just
Absolutely. When we have any kind of contact with what's actually happening. And that could be anything. It could be a circumstance, but it could also just be an experience of living presence. When we have any contact with that feeling of immediacy of a circumstance, pause. Don't go right up in your head trying to explain something. Just pause and try to drop down into that more. Just try to let that moment extend. The moment when you're feeling more relaxed, or the moment when you're experiencing something in your sadhana, or the moment when, I see that person actually likes me, right? When you notice those moments, stop, pause, relax. And it's like trying to make an ice cream cone last longer. Like, try to enjoy that more, right? And just let yourself be more immersed in that experience. Remember that you are made of wisdom and you are immersed in wisdom. It isn't all up to you what to do about everything. When you relax in a circumstance in which more wisdom has come to you, if you relax, more wisdom will come to you. Right? There's something coming toward you. You're in a collaboration with wisdom, with nature. It's not all up to you to do something about everything. So a lot of it is about being receptive, like pausing and allowing yourself to be receptive and sort of elongating those moments, getting more of the taste of them in your mouth so that they become more familiar to you and more habitable so that you can inhabit those moments more. So having recognized them, which is a boon, now recognition is just the very first step. Now you have to get used to it. You have to acclimatize. You have to explore. One of the keys to understanding Trika Shaivism, is through the concept of Maya. We live in such a culture of salvation and damnation that we tend to gravitate toward those concepts in other traditions from India or Tibet or China or wherever that confirm our idea, our deeply held belief, embodied belief, that we are being judged and we're going to be punished if we do wrong. We've imported that into our ideas of karma. And then we've become more familiar, just generally, those of us who practice in traditions from India, more generally, those traditions that have more punitive, right and wrong, good and bad, punishing and reward types of axes, we tend to gravitate towards those things. And this goes for our understanding of Maya, which is most often translated as illusion or delusion or ignorance, but most often delusion or illusion in a sort of negative sense, telling us you're all deluded, you're all, in a state of illusion. Everything here is an illusion. And although there are traditions from India that say this, we love to hear that again because in a sense, we've already heard it our whole lives, right? Not precisely in those words, but we've all heard our whole lives, you're sinners, you're ignorant, you don't know what's going on, you're going to be punished. So one of the feeling tones of Trika Shaivism is it's more celebratory. And of course, it doesn't have a concept of sin. And it doesn't, in the end, in the absolute sense, has no concept of right and wrong. It only says there is goodness without an opposite. This is from one of my favorite books from the tradition. It's called The Magical Jewel of Devotion. So this is from Swami Lakshmanju's rendition, and it's a very beautiful devotional text, which is my favorite kind. So this is what he says. This is from The Magical Jewel of Devotion. Maya is not ignorance. Maya is just the freedom of Lord Shiva. By his freedom, he conceals his nature. But it is not that he has concealed his nature and now he has not revealed his nature. He makes ignorant persons feel that it is concealed. Actually, it is not concealed. That is the position of Maya. Maya is nothing. Maya is divine. So in Trika Shaivism, Maya is a Devi, a goddess. And she is basically the power, the Shakti, that creates the possibility of manifest forms arising from the unconditioned base state of reality. So she is the creatrix in the sense that she gives the tools that carve all of us and all of this out of the infinite so that something can appear, so that a form can appear. And her tools are called the kanchukas. They're almost like her artist tool set. Most of you know that in Trika Shaivism, there's this idea of the tattvas, which are basically experiential possibilities that are an aspect of reality and that make it possible for worlds and beings to appear and also disappear. So the kanchukas are like the artist's tool that carve out more limited experiences for the enjoyment of God, for the enjoyment of Lord Shiva. Just like we have this glass, which is made of originally came from a beach, from sand of some sort. Maybe not a beach, but sand. Sand is a good symbol of the undifferentiated and unconditioned. It's just all homogeneous little bits of things. Think of that as the ocean of consciousness and energy, or the field of consciousness and energy. In order to make this glass, that field has to be limited in some way. You can't drink water or have the experience of drinking water out of an entire beach of sand. We have to take a little bit of it and we have to create a form. And now that this is created, it is more conditioned. It has less of the infinite potential of the beach. Because, of course, the beach, with all that sand, maybe people don't know that glass is made of sand, but it's one way of making glasses out of sand. There's probably other ways now, but I'm old-fashioned. That sand could be a plate, it could be a vase, it could be a sculpture, right? A glass sculpture. It could be windows. It could be any number of things made out of glass. It has a lot of potential. Once you create a definite experience of an object, then there's also an experience of the limitation of that potential. So for anything to appear, for anything at all to appear, there must be limitation, or an appearance of limitation in any case. This is how an artist works. You have the infinite possibility of many, many, many colors you could choose to paint something. You have to choose some very limited number of colors. And from those very limited number of colors, you just take a very limited amount of paint. And then you put the paint on a canvas and you paint something, and then it dries. And now that paint is now a definite form that is much more limited than the universe of all colors. Same with music. You can't make music with every note. You have to choose a limited subset. So limitation is the primary tool of the artist, and God is the artist. So these limitations are called the Kanchukas, and Maya Devi is in charge of the Kanchukas. So those Kanchukas are, if we think of all of the unlimited qualities of this entire reality, the Kanchukas are limitations on the experience of agency or creative power. We are experiences of that limitation. I don't have unlimited Shakti or unlimited creative power or unlimited agency. I don't know about you, maybe you do. But I have definite limitations, and my limitations show up in a particular way, which we could call my unique dimension, right? Each of us has some basic limitations that we might share with other beings, but we also have the details of those limitations that are part of our unique dimension that give us personality and make us interesting. And then there's a limitation on knowledge or wisdom. We call this ignorance, but Abhinavagupta said there is really no ignorance. There is just an experience of limitation of knowledge. So there's no ignorance. There's just an experience of the limitation of knowledge. It's just like records to CDs. You know, when we used to have records, they had a much bigger range of sound that could be reproduced. Then you have CDs, the ends get chopped off, right? And then now we have digital music, and it's less of the sound nuance gets in there. That's how the process happens. And then there's a limitation on our experience of completeness or fullness. And of course, we all have some experience of lack, of missing something. And ultimately, what we're missing is immersion in our real nature with full awareness. There's a limitation on our experience of time. We are subject to this experience we call linear time. We don't have, most of us, more than fleeting glimpses of the experience of Maha time, or all at onceness, or what Anandamayi Ma called the supreme moment. And then there's limitations on omnipresence. Like, we don't experience ourselves as being everywhere unless we're extremely realized. We experience ourselves as being here in this one little place, in this one little body. So what Swami Lakshmanji was saying is that there are really no limitations, but these Kanchukas represent experiential limitations. They represent the experience that Lord Shiva is creating, not any actual limitation. And that's a little bit tricky to understand, but I think the simplest way to understand it is a metaphor or analogy that I've used many times before. If you're an actor playing the part of someone with a limitation, like you've lost the love of your life, or you've lost a limb, or you've lost all your money, or something like that. You've lost your mind. A spate of TV shows about people who've lost their minds the last few years. The actors that are playing those roles are not experiencing any limitation. They are simply experiencing a play of limitation. And in fact, you could say they're even more skillful and less limited because they're able to play those parts of limited characters. So that's what it means to say we're experiencing limitation. It's a real experience. There actually, in the absolute sense, is no limitation because all of these parts are being played by one subject, just like an actor plays a part in a play. So whatever limitation you're experiencing, and this gets back to your question about self-hatred, when and if we start to have more of a direct experience of living presence, and we start to grok that that's actually what we are, then we can have more of a real experience that however we're showing up is a play of that, is an experience of that. It is not the only thing that we are. Right? There's that famous thing that people always say, you are not your body, or I am not my body, which I always felt should be amended to say, you are not only your body. You are not, because of course God is everything. So there's not anything that God is not. So how can you say you are not your body? But what that means is that you don't end at your body. You're not limited to this. You're not limited to your karmas. Those are experiences being produced by this living presence. And when you have a more real apprehension through your own sense perceptions of that living presence, then you can have more of a real sense that you are being played by a master player. And then you can start having more of a sense of humor about your karmas, right? About these patterns that are kind of inhabiting you in some way or another.